Police lights slashed through the stillness of the witching hour, their red and blue pulses painting my lawn like a crime scene. I stood in the doorway, hands gripping the knob, exhaustion sinking into my bones like damp rot. Rubbing my eyes, I tried to process the surreal tableau unfolding before me. Lydia Monroe, self-crowned HOA dictator who'd terrorized our neighborhood for years, stood on the sidewalk, arms crossed, a smug grin plastered across her face as if she owned the block. She was spinning her tale to the officers, playing the wounded victim, accusing me of, get this, blocking her guests from parking in my driveway. Rewind. I'm the guy who caught her illegally siphoning my well water for her precious garden, and my response? I flushed her irrigation system with sewage. Legally, of course. That was just the opening act. Now, here she was, turning a legally parked truck into her latest crusade. The officers struggled to keep straight faces as Lydia ranted, her shrill voice slicing the night, claiming my truck, parked squarely in my driveway, mind you, was half a foot too far out, forcing her guests to park across the street instead of claiming my space. I was beyond tired, frustration boiling over, but mostly I was dumbfounded. How had it come to this? "Sir, it's a simple request," one officer said, his voice steady but laced with disbelief. "If you could move the truck so her guests can park, we won't have to escalate." I blinked, incredulous. "Escalate?" I scoffed, the absurdity hitting like a freight train. "What is this? A global crisis over parking spots?" I wasn't aiming for humor, but the sheer lunacy of it all was suffocating. Lydia didn't even glance my way, too busy basking in her performance, practically glowing with self-righteousness. "I've lived here 20 years and never had trouble with neighbors until this guy showed up," she declared, gesturing at me like I was a stray dog. "Now he's causing problems for my guests. They should be able to park wherever they need." I shook my head, jaw tight. This wasn't about parking or her so-called guests. It was about control. Lydia had spent years strong-arming the HOA into her personal puppet show, and I was her newest target. But I wasn't about to play by her rules. "Ma'am, could you—" An officer tried, but Lydia was on a roll, her voice climbing to an ear-splitting pitch. "I just want to be treated fairly," she snapped, hands flailing theatrically. "Why should my guests park across the street like second-class citizens? This is a neighborhood, not a parking lot. This guy is causing trouble for everyone." I opened my mouth, but the officer cut me off, likely trying to avoid a full-blown showdown. "Sir, if you just move the truck, we'll be out of your hair." That's when it clicked. Lydia didn't care about fairness or anyone's needs, but her own. This was the same woman who'd stormed my yard to lecture me about weeds near the sidewalk while her own garden bloomed, watered by my stolen well water. She'd been siphoning from my private well for months, acting like HOA rules didn't apply to her. I'd already dealt with that, flushing her system with sewage as a legal reminder she wasn't above the law. Now she was back, thinking her petty crusades made her untouchable. She thrived on bullying people into submission, expecting them to cave. Not this time. "Officer," I said, voice calm but edged with sarcasm, "you're asking me to move my truck because her guests can't be bothered to park on the street like everyone else. Am I hearing that right?" The officer gave me a look but stayed silent. Lydia huffed, "I've been nothing but reasonable, and this is how I'm treated." She was gearing up for another outburst. I'd had enough. With a sly grin, I turned and walked back inside, leaving Lydia and the officers dumbfounded. I wasn't moving the truck, and I wasn't apologizing. This was just the beginning. As I closed the door, I heard Lydia's voice rise to a screech, "I'll call 911." I chuckled. It wasn't an emergency, but she was a master at turning molehills into mountains. Collapsing onto my couch, I could still hear her outside, spinning her tale of victimhood, painting me as the neighborhood menace. This wasn't about parking anymore. It was her obsession with control, her need to dictate every detail of everyone's lives. My phone buzzed. An HOA email, another passive-aggressive warning. They'd been harassing me since Lydia's campaign began, first for loud noises, because I dared mow my lawn at 10 a.m. Then for a tiny crack in my mailbox, which she claimed violated standards. The HOA never heard my side. They were her puppets, bowing to her every whim. That's when I knew I had to fight back on my terms. The HOA wasn't my ally, and neither were the officers if they kept indulging her. Sirens wailed again, closer now. Of course, Lydia had called 911 again. I peeked through the blinds. 2 more squad cars, lights flashing like a crime scene. Lydia was in full drama mode, playing the wronged party with crocodile tears. "This man's out of control," she wailed, voice trembling with faux distress. "He's blocking my driveway, and my guests can't park. I've never been treated like this." The officers looked exasperated, clearly not thrilled to be dragged into HOA nonsense at this hour. "Ma'am, explain what happened," one asked, his tone weary. Lydia shot me a venomous glare before launching into her story. "He's been trouble since he moved in, and now he's blocking my driveway so my guests can't park. I'm just trying to get them settled, and he's making it impossible." I barely held back an eye roll. A family neighborhood? She was acting like I'd held her guests hostage. The officer glanced at my truck, parked legally, not blocking anything. "Could you move it, sir, to avoid escalation?" he asked. I shook my head, firm. "I'm not moving it. It's where it's supposed to be. She can park across the street. There's plenty of space." Lydia's smug facade cracked. "This is unbelievable," she exclaimed, hitting a new shrill pitch. She dialed 911 again, fake crying to the dispatcher. "This man refuses to move his truck. It's blocking my driveway, and I'm at my wit's end." I realized she had no intention of letting this go. She was determined to make my life miserable, dragging this out until I broke. But I wouldn't. If she wanted a fight, I'd give her one, on my terms. The next morning, I woke to an eerie silence. No Lydia screaming in my yard, no HOA emails flooding my inbox. It was too quiet, and I knew better than to think it was over. Sipping strong coffee at my kitchen table, I started planning. Lydia's strategy relied on me caving to the pressure of police visits and HOA complaints. She was used to neighbors folding, giving in to avoid her wrath. But I wasn't like them. I'd flipped the script. Step 1. Gather evidence. I couldn't let her twist the narrative. I went outside, snapping photos of my truck from every angle, showing it was parked legally, far from her driveway. Her guests had no issue parking across the street. This was a power play. Step 2. The HOA. I called their office, keeping my tone casual, and asked for the exact parking rules. The rep confirmed I was in the right. No one could block a driveway, and my truck was fine. Lydia's complaint was baseless. For days, I watched her like a hawk. Every time her guests parked in front of my driveway, a clear violation, I snapped pictures. The HOA rules were strict. No blocking driveways, even briefly. Lydia lived by her own rules, but I'd use hers against her. I sent an anonymous email to the HOA, attaching photos of Lydia's guests blocking my driveway, citing the parking policy, and noting her 911 escalation. I added I'd involved local authorities if they ignored this. Hitting send, I grinned. She'd weaponized the HOA against me. Now I was turning it back on her. Over the next few days, Lydia grew paranoid, peering out her window, sensing trouble. I kept gathering evidence, building an airtight case. Then the HOA emailed a resolution session to address our disturbances. This was my moment. The meeting day arrived. I walked in with a folder of evidence, photos, emails, the parking policy, logs of Lydia's violations. The room was sterile. Long table, stiff chairs, a whiteboard, a stack of paperwork. The board members sat, expressions bored, but tension crackled. Lydia sat at the table's end, arms crossed, her smug smile signaling she thought she'd win. I took a seat across, meeting her cold stare with calm confidence. She launched into a victim act, claiming I disrupted the community by blocking her driveway. "I just want peace," she said, voice dripping with fake sincerity. "But this man makes it impossible." I stood, laying out the facts. Her demand to move my truck, My refusal due to available street parking, her 911 call over nothing. I presented photos of my truck, parked legally, then photos of her guests blocking my driveway, breaking HOA rules. Lydia's smugness faded to shock. I handed over the parking policy, highlighting the no blocking rule. The board members exchanged stunned glances. Silence stretched. A board member spoke. "Lydia, it seems you violated the rules, not your neighbor." Her face flushed, embarrassment cracking her facade. "That's not true. He's lying," she stammered, voice cracking. The board issued her a warning, noting her guest's violations for further investigation. Lydia was cornered, her lies exposed. Leaving the meeting, I felt triumphant. I'd turned the HOA against her, using their own rules to dismantle her power. She'd likely try again. She wasn't one to quit. But for now, I'd won. The neighborhood could breathe easier, free from her petty reign. Back home, I sat on my porch, watching the sunset. A neighbor waved, a rare gesture of warmth. Lydia's influence was gone, and I'd made sure of it, playing smarter, not harder. I'd proven you can beat a tyrant at their own game, one rule at a time.